Hello class, it's Mr. Overton again. Over the last several weeks we have been talking about a lot about plants and how plants create sugar using photosynthesis. We've now transitioned to talking a little bit about animals and how animals take in that sugar from plants or from other animals, and they use all of those nutrients to keep themselves alive. Now we're going to transition to talking about how plants and animals interact with each other and how both of those kinds of organisms interact with their physical environment. So, you might have some questions like how does a non-living thing affect a living thing, or how can organisms affect their environment? I have a quick demonstration that we're going to do that might help to clear that up. So let's go. Okay, in order to see how living things interact with their environment, let's take a look at this. What is that? So this, believe it or not, is the perfect representation of an ecosystem. Now, an ecosystem is simply a broad term for both living and non-living components interacting together in a defined area. So what we have here is we have a defined area, and we have living and non-living components. This is a sourdough starter in which we mix flour and water and allow wild yeast like Saccharomyces cerevisiae and other helpful bacteria like lactobacillus to live in this environment and to prepare this dough concoction to make bread. So the living components of this system are the yeast and the bacteria that are inhabiting this dough mixture, and also the flour itself used to be alive as it was a part of grain before it was ground up. The non-living components are, of course, the container itself, the air in the container, the water, and also the temperature around the environment. So we're going to see how temperature affects this ecosystem. In the same way that temperature affects you and your body responds to different temperatures, yeast and bacteria are also affected by the temperature of their environment. You may have noticed that this little ecosystem, this sour starter, began its life in the fridge. So over the next several hours, as it heats up to room temperature, I'm going to be taking regular pictures of this little ecosystem to see how it changes with the temperature increase. I marked a rubber band around the rim to show you where it began, the dough began to live, and we can see the change as it heats up. Whoops, just realized I left the lid screwed tightly on. That is not a good idea, because I've heard that as things change in the ecosystem, if you don't leave any room for air to escape, the glass might explode. So that's not good. Glad I caught that before it was too late. As you can tell, there have been some pretty significant changes in our sourdough starter over the past 7 hours. So if you have not already guessed, the sourdough starter was in the fridge because microorganisms like yeast and bacteria respond to the cold of their environment by going into hibernation. So this hibernation means that they are essentially asleep and they're not eating as much of the resources in their environment as they otherwise would. However, as they warm up, they come back to life. And because the flour is full of sugar, they begin eating the sugar at a very, very furious pace. And what do they release when they eat sugar and cellular respirate that sugar? They release a lot of carbon dioxide, and this carbon dioxide gas swells the dough mixture until it is at least double or more in size from the original. So let's just take a look. The sign of a good, ready sourdough starter is that it will float in water. So all these gas bubbles are making a tremendous buoyant difference in the flour. That looks pretty good. Alright, now let's make some bread. Alright, so we have gone ahead and made some bread. So we mixed more flour and more water into the yeast along with a little bit of salt. And then we allowed that to, so mixing it together, we allowed it to rise because the microorganisms, the yeast and the bacteria inside of the bread began to kind of eat away at the sugar and the other nutrients inside of the flour, making us a nice delicious loaf. So I think it's right about ready to come out of the oven. Let's take a look. Look at that, we have ourselves a loaf of bread. Alright, we've waited a little while for our bread to cool and I've packed it away. So here's our loaf one more time. So bread has been extremely important to all human societies throughout history. Firstly because it's extremely simple. Only 4 ingredients are needed to make a delightful loaf of bread. You need flour, water, a little bit of salt, and then the microbiotic cultures and ecosystems like yeast and bacteria that help to make it rise. Second, because it's extremely packable and stable. You can bring this on long trips and it will stay good a long time. And it is also extremely energy dense. So as you guys know, flour is a grain which is made almost entirely of starch, and starch is long chains of sugar molecules bonded together. So this entire thing is essentially one giant packet of stored sugar that we can use. Alright, we also have a little bit of bonus footage here. So we talked earlier in the year about decomposers and how decomposers work in ecosystems to break down decaying matter to return all the nutrients to the soil. And here we have my old loaf of bread. It's about a week and a half old. And some decomposers have gotten to work on it in different areas, slowly breaking this loaf down. Once again, it is made of sugar, and sugar is very delicious, not only to human beings, but to a lot of different living things. So different kinds of fungus and molds will definitely take over, even if it's well preserved.